There are over 190 countries on planet Earth today, populated by over 8 billion people. And for some reason, 80% of the population look at this one small sliver of land and consider it one of the most holy places on Earth. Today, let's talk about Israel and what makes Israel so important. The nation of Israel returning to its homeland is a miracle. Back in 1878, the Israelites began to return to a city called Petah Tikva, and no other nation in the history of the world has ever been dispersed from its homeland and then returned to it over 1,800 years later. One of the things that makes this so exciting is that it's predicted in the Bible thousands of years ago. In Amos chapter 9, verses 14 and 15, it's the last two verses in the book of Amos. God says, "I will restore the fortunes of my people Israel, and they shall rebuild the ruined cities and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and drink their wine, and they shall make gardens and eat their fruit. I will plant them on their land, and they shall never again be uprooted." It's also interesting to see that Israel is used as a sign of our Lord's second presence. In the Old Testament, in Hosea 9:10, it says, "I saw your fathers as the first ripe in the fig tree at its season." And so we know that Israel is represented by figs in the Old Testament. We see that also in the book of Jeremiah, in chapter 24, verses 5 and 8. We also see in Matthew chapter 24, when the disciples ask Jesus, "What shall be the sign of your invisible second presence?" And they use Israel as the example. Learn the parable of the fig tree, that when her branch is tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is nigh. When you see all these things, know that it is nigh. So when we see that the Israelites are returning to Israel for the first time in over 1,800 years, this just might be a sign that our Lord has returned. One question you may ask is why? Why is Israel God's chosen nation? And why are they used in biblical prophecy for the times that we live in now? The promises to the nation of Israel began with Abraham. When Abraham showed his faithfulness to God by not withholding Isaac, God said to him, "I will surely bless you, and I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven and as the sand on the seashore." So why are Abraham's offspring described as the stars of heaven and the sand of the seashore? Well, the reason is because two different groups of people are being pictured here. Those of the stars of heaven are a spiritual class. In Galatians 3:29, the Apostle Paul says, "If you are Christ's, then you are Abraham's offspring and heirs according to the promise." And the other class is an earthly class. It's the nation of Israel, the sand of the seashore. Romans 9:27, the Apostle Paul says, quoting Isaiah concerning Israel, "Though the number of the sons of Israel be as the sand of the sea." And so those are the two classes that are being represented in the children of Abraham. We have the church, the bride of Christ, the spiritual class, the stars of heaven, and we have the nation of Israel, who will instruct the world of mankind in God's kingdom, the sand of the sea. It's so important to know what Israel's role is in God's kingdom. Israel is going to be returned to their homeland, and they will be taught the truth about Jesus. And then the truth of God's plan will come through them to the rest of the world. In Micah 4:2, it says, "Many nations shall come and say, 'Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob.'" And there it says, "Out of Zion shall go forth the law." This is the new law, the new covenant. "And he shall judge between many peoples." This is a picture of God's kingdom, and in God's kingdom, the Israelites will be the ones that share the truth with the world. So, when we see the city restored and their desert land become a land of produce, we can see the beginning stages of Ezekiel 37 being fulfilled, where it says, "The hand of the Lord was upon me, and carried me out in the spirit of the Lord, and set me down in the midst of the valley which was full of bones. And he said unto me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. And God said, And I shall put my spirit in you, and ye shall live, and I shall place you in your own land. Then shall ye know that I, the Lord, have spoken it and performed it, saith the Lord. And that's why the nation of Israel is so important. And that's why it is so encouraging to see what's happening in the nation of Israel today. I hope you found this helpful. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me at timesofrestitution@gmail.com.